In May 1975, just days after the fall of Saigon, American Marines engaged Khmer Rouge forces on the tiny Pacific island of Koh Tang in what would be the last battle of the Vietnam War. It was known as the Mayaguez incident, and it was in many ways a microcosm of the larger conflict in Vietnam. The American effort there was plagued by poor planning and leadership as it pitted underprepared Marines against a nearly overwhelming enemy. Although today the incident is rarely mentioned, it paints a clear picture of how executive leadership, or in this case, the lack thereof, can be the effective difference between success and failure in battle. It's the topic of tonight's Real History.
In 1975, there occurred what has come to be known as the Battle for Koh Tang Island. This was the military action to recover a seized U.S. container ship, the SS Mayaguez, and rescue its crew. On May 12th, 1975, the SS Mayaguez, a U.S. container ship sailing in international waters, was seized and boarded by elements of the Khmer Rouge because Saigon and Phnom Penh had fallen several weeks earlier. The United States had no diplomatic relations with the new government. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of forces available, and the quickest forces that are available, it turns out, are Marines that are undergoing training in Okinawa, Japan. These Marines are not even finished with their training. So you're talking about untrained Marines armed with small arms that were cast off from the Vietnam War. M16 rifles, M60 machine guns, hand grenades, and they have been out on maneuvers for 24 hours. They're dirty, they're hungry, they're inexperienced, and they're taken to the airport and flown to be the rescue force. Now the plan is that the Marines will helicopter out, pull alongside the Mayaguez, and will accomplish the first ship-to-ship boarding of Marines on a hostile vessel since the War of 1812. They go aboard the ship, they find the Mayaguez deserted. Unknown to American authorities, the crew was transported to the mainland. The second prong of the operation is Marines will helicopter onto the island of Koh Tang. This is a small island, about 26 miles off the coast of Cambodia. To say that the intelligence they had for the operation was inadequate would be an understatement. They only have one map of the island, and the scale is so small that the island appears less the size of half a peanut. And what little intelligence they have indicates that the crew is being held on this island. They were told to expect between 30 to 50 militia fishermen. In fact, the island is garrisoned by between 300 to 500 battle-hardened Khmer Rouge soldiers in entrenched positions with heavy weapons. What U.S. intelligence was unaware of was that the island, Koh Tang, was in contention between Cambodia and Vietnam, and that the Cambodians had heavily reinforced the island with the expectation that Vietnam might make efforts to capture it. What you have to understand is that before they can extract the Marines, they have to reinforce the Marines with sufficient strength to create a perimeter. So you have to actually add Marines before you can get the Marines off the island. The Air Force, after several difficulties, is able to land Marines on the island. The Marines exited the helicopter right into enemy fire. And one of the Marines I spoke with said there were so many shots coming through the helicopter that they could actually see light through the aircraft. They took incredible fire. While the second wave is en route, news is received that the Cambodians, encouraged by airstrikes on the mainland, have released the crew. President Ford had promised that once the crew was released, all offensive actions against Cambodia would be discontinued. And as such, the second wave of helicopters is ordered to return to base. This greatly distresses the Marine commanders, who are aware of the fact that there are Marines still on the island, and there is almost a mutiny in the air. Fortunately, the upper commanders are able to explain to the commander-in-chief what the situation is, and he rescinds his withdrawal order. This is possibly the most micromanaged battle in the history of the United States Marine Corps, because in real time you have the President, the National Security Council, the National Military Command Center, the DIA, the NSA, the CIA, the State Department, the commander of the theater in Thailand, the commander-in-chief of the Pacific, and the Marine commanders putting in their input all at the same time. As you can imagine, this greatly complicates the command and control of the battle. At one point, the senior commander on the island at the time is on 3 radios, one with the President of the United States. All of this while under fire. Now, in the afternoon, the decision has been made to extract these Marines. But there are only 5 helicopters available, and 2 of them, search and rescue helicopters, are really not suitable to the task, but they are what they have. So as darkness falls, the first helicopter comes in and is able to extract the Marines off the east beach. It's getting dark, and imagine these helicopters having to make this landing under fire in complete darkness. What you have to understand is, as the Marines are extracted from the island, the perimeter is reduced, making the danger of being overrun by the Cambodians all the more greater. The last helicopter is able to return for a second load and extracts the last 29 Marines from the island. He tries to make 3 landings in the dark and has to abort all 3 landings. So the 4th landing, he decides to take a chance, and he makes the landing with his lights on. This facilitates the rescue of the Marines, but as you can imagine, greatly increases the chances of them being hit by enemy fire. Now, in the confusion of the extraction at night, under fire, 3 Marines do not make it back aboard the helicopter. The Battle of Koh Tang is certain to go down in the annals of Marine Corps history. What you have to consider is that a group of untrained Marines was landed on an island against a superior force in entrenched positions with heavy weapons, and yet were able to not only contain but hold off the enemy to a point where they can be safely extracted from the island. That has to be one of the greatest feat of arms in Marine Corps history.